Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the Kiwi Lads channel. In this video, I'll be doing my preview for the upcoming match between Fiji and Samoa. But if you do enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Nonetheless, let's get straight into this preview. So the Pacific Nations Cup, we are at the final round, which does mean that the Pacific Nations Cup is coming to a close very soon, and that means that it is off. So the Pacific Nations Cup 2022 competition is just about coming to an end, which means it's all to play for in this final round. Now, I am actually filming this before we have seen Tonga versus Australia, which does mean that there is a possibility that for this match it is a must-win for Samoa if they do want to become the champions for the Pacific Nations Cup. Currently they are sitting in first, but if Australia A are able to beat Tonga, they will actually move themselves up to either 11 or 12 points, which is just ahead of Samoa, who are sitting on 10, whereas Fiji, they are currently sitting on 5 points, so they would need a monumental win, plus Tonga would have to beat Australia A for Fiji to be able to win the Pacific Nations Cup. But first of all, in this preview, we will be looking through at previous fixtures, then we will be moving on to the key players for both of these sides, and then last but not least, we will be giving our score prediction for this exciting contest. But we will start with previous fixtures, and we will start with the home side Fiji, as this game is being played in Latoka, Fiji. So they will have that home crowd advantage, and anytime Fiji play at home, the crowd are absolutely electric. It has been brilliant to see for this Pacific Nations Cup, all taking place in the Pacific Islands, really showing how much Pacific Island rugby adds to the world of rugby in general. But now looking through at those previous fixtures, first game for Fiji of this Pacific Nations Cup was up against Tonga, and they did end up winning that game 36-0. Now the thing that made that win so impressive was the fact that there was a lot of attention on the Tongan side. They had Charles Piutau, Israel Folau and Malakai Fekitoa all making their debut for Tonga. So a lot of people thought that this game was going to be a lot closer, but Fiji, they had other plans. They were well and truly dominant in that contest, winning at 36-0 like I mentioned. And you'd have to say, for a side that hadn't played in a long time, Fiji, they didn't really look that way. Yes, they had a couple errors sneaking in there, but after those early nerves settled, Fiji really started coming alive. I remember Vanai Habosi, it was his debut, and he certainly played like a man who had been in that Fijian side for a long time. But in that game, Tonga, they had a couple close chances to being able to score points, but Fiji's defence was overall pretty defensively sound, and that is something they're going to need in this game up against Samoa. Samoa more recently have found themselves an extremely dangerous rolling maul. The next week, Fiji, they were taking on Australia A. Now, before this contest took place, I actually thought Fiji were going to be able to get themselves a win. They had so much class in that backline and a physical four-pack, but Australia A, they were just able to get those points when they needed them, and also scoring a few tries in the process to win that game, 32 points to 18. So that was the loss for Fiji that I don't think many people saw coming, but because of it, it did mean that rather than this game being a whoever is victorious wins the competition, now it is more of the case of can Samoa manage to keep themselves in first place, or will it be Fiji who knock them down and Australia A take themselves out the title? But during that game, Fiji just didn't quite get into it the way that they did for that first match up against Tonga. Like I mentioned, they had their class players out there, but it just didn't quite link up. A few handling errors were costing them, and also a few penalties against them. And Australia A, they were a lot more clinical. But now looking through at Samoa's previous fixtures, speaking of Australia A, that was the first challenge for Samoa in their Pacific Nations Cup, up against an Australia A side that no one really knew how they were going to play. And to be fair, it was pretty decent from Australia A in that contest, but in the end, Samoa getting themselves the win, 31 points to 26, and what was a very impressive start to their Pacific Nations Cup. They did have that very strong rolling maul, like I mentioned, although the rolling maul really took over in the second match that they did play, and that was up against Tonga, where they did win 34 points to 18. Now, I should mention, Tonga scored all of their 18 points in that first half. That was without the likes of Israel Folau, Charles Piutau and Malakai Fekitoa, and they actually seem to look stronger at times without those three big star players. Whereas in that game, Samoa, they have Ray Nuia. He was able to get himself the hat-trick, which was incredibly impressive for the number 2. Does normally play in the Bunnings NPC and also at Super Rugby level, but I don't believe I can think of a time that he has scored a hat-trick as of late, so he'll be very happy, and he will have a lot of momentum behind him heading into this match, not just because of how strong that rolling maul is for Samoa. Now next we will actually look at key players for both of these sides. We will start with Fiji. Now someone who's been added into their starting lineup is the first player I am selecting, and that is Waisia Naiafalevu, the captain of the Fijian side. He went all right in that first match up against Tonga, but I think this game is going to be one that we see him really step up. He'll be excited for the challenge of trying to take down Samoa, and Fiji have certainly got the capabilities to be able to do so, but he plays for Stade Francais in the top 14. I do mention it all the time. He's alongside Nari Laumape. Now, he can either play in the centres or out on the wing. They've got him at number 13 for this game, so depending on injuries and whatnot, maybe Tamani Valu, when he comes off the bench, Waifalevu does decide to slot into either Vinaya Habusi's wing, or maybe he goes out for Wainaniolo, although I believe Joshua Tuasova is probably saying that that wing is his when he makes his way off the bench. But that is the first name for Fiji that I say to look out for. Another name that I do say to watch out for is Albert Tuisui. He scored a try last week for Fiji in their game up against Australia A, but he is an incredibly hard man to put down, and post-contact meters is somewhere that man can get a lot of gain for Fiji, and if he keeps on doing that throughout this contest, you'd have to say that Samoa would be put on the back foot straight away from any breakdown after his run. And then that is exactly what the Fijians will want. We know how quick they can offload and create little magical moments in that backline and forward pack. So all they need is a bit of go forward, a little bit of momentum. And I think Albert Tuisui, maybe he doesn't score a try in this contest, but I think he will help set up one or two. Now the last name that I am going to be going with for Fiji to watch out for, I was going to go with Tuithuvu, but instead I'm actually going to go with Sam Matavesi for this one. He is playing number 2 for this match, and the reason I say to watch out for him is because the best way to counter a side who love a rolling maul is to put them under pressure with your own rolling maul, and Sam Matavesi, his lineouts are going to have to be precise. If he messes up too many of them, it goes down to either a scrum or a lineout in favour of Samoa, and we have seen what they did up against Tonga. They can march for 30 metres if they need to, so that is why Sam Matavesi is the last name of players to watch out for. But now looking at Samoa, I don't have to look too far through this lineup in order of the numbers, because Ray Nui at number 2 is the first man I say to watch out for. He scored 3 tries last week, like I mentioned a bit earlier on. He's been dangerous throughout this competition. That rolling maul of Samoa, yes, it's not just him that is causing that massive impact, but it is him who's getting those lineouts pretty precise throughout the whole competition to then lead to that rolling maul that Samoa are using brilliantly at the moment. So Fiji, they're going to have to shut that down early, because if Ray Nui starts finding the momentum like he did last week up against Tonga, it could be a long day at the office for Fiji. Then the next name that I've got for Samoa is Jordan Taufua. He will be playing 7 for this match rather than 8 like he did last week, but in that game last week he did look very impressive. You wouldn't have thought it was a Samoan debut. He has got a few caps in the past for the All Blacks, and he has been playing pretty well in the top 14 as of late. And the thing with the top 14 is some of those forwards, they just seem to find that next level of physicality, and when you combine that with a Pacific Island player, you can have an absolute beast, and that is what Jordan Taufua will be in this match. But I am interested to see how he goes at open side flanker, as we do normally see him at number 8 in the top 14 as well. But I think he'll just bring that extra little bit of physicality. He loves a jackal in the breakdown, and that will be what he goes for. Fritz Lee slotting in at number 8 for Samoa, so maybe they end up switching a little bit later on in this contest if they feel it's not quite working for Taufua being number 7 rather than 8. But I think he will be able to have a very solid game. And then the last name that I have got in my players to watch out for is actually the fullback for Samoa, Danny Tuala. Now, I was very close to saying Nigel Awong for this contest, but I think they're going to try and shut him down a lot more than he has been in the last couple of weeks. So that is why I've gone with Danny Tuala. He's a Hawke's Bay representative in the Bunnings NBC. He's great under a high ball, which is certainly something that they will use to their advantage. And that's another side of things that Samoa will have to be careful with. Yes, Samoa have got that dangerous rolling maul, but Fiji, they will have a decent kicking game in this contest, I believe. So they will have to make sure that they take a majority of those high balls, Samoa, or else Fiji, they'll knock it back onto their side, and then that's when that dangerous back line starts to kick in with the likes of Waifalevu, also out on the wings, Wainaniolo and Habusi. You've got to make sure that you stop any momentum for Fiji, and a way to do that is to shut down any type of kicking game that they do try and present. But those are the 3 players for both of these sides that I feel will be dangerous throughout this matchup. Now we move on to the hard part, the prediction of this match. Now Samoa, they are currently 2 wins from 2, the only team in the competition to be sitting that way. Fiji, they've made quite a few changes in that starting lineup, going more similar with what they had in the first match rather than the second. This one is a pretty tough game to try and predict. Samoa, do they get that rolling maul going? That is the huge question. If it gets going for Samoa in that rolling maul and they get at least 1 rolling maul try, I'd say that they'll take it. But if they don't get the rolling maul tries and Fiji are able to defend that, then I would say that Fiji can win it. I want to say whoever wins it by 5, but I don't know who wins it. This is the tricky part. I'm going to say Fiji win this game by 5. It's a huge call, definitely with the form that Samoa are in. Now, in fact, I'm going to switch that. I'm going to say Samoa win it by 5. The rolling maul's going to be dangerous once again, and Samoa are going to take themselves all the way to a Pacific Nations Cup championship. We'll go with that, Samoa by 5. Final answer, probably not. I'll probably switch between it about 15 times before we get to the matchup, but only by the 5 points difference. I think this game's going to be an absolutely awesome one, and we will be covering it live on the channel with our commentary. But thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. 3:30 p.m. is when this one will be kicking off in Lautoka, and like I mentioned, it's going to be epic, and we will be there for every step of the way. But thank you all very much for tuning in, and I will see you all for the next one.